Hey everyone, and welcome to 121 Solo. I am Peter, and I am going to be talking about searching today. Yeah, this is a new thing I'm doing every so often. This won't be like every week necessarily or whatever, but if I watch a movie and I think it's interesting enough to talk about, I will do a solo discussion if I know that the other guys aren't watching it anytime soon. So, yeah, searching. And there'll probably be a few of these in the next couple of weeks because I'm catching up for the end of year awards that we're doing. And yes, it's February. I'm aware of that, but we're kind of doing it around the same time as the Oscars because it gives us time to do this, catch up on some movies we missed. So searching, I'll start spoiler free as I always will. I'll give you warning somewhere in the middle before I go into spoilers, and let's talk about this. So what is searching? Searching is a thriller in the style of Unfriended, where the movie takes place entirely on a computer screen. Although this one's a little bit different in that it doesn't always necessarily stay on the same computer screen. And it does cheat a little bit here or there with some little things. I'll get into that as I talk about the movie. But so it's a movie on a computer screen, and it's a movie starring John Cho, who plays this father whose teenage daughter goes missing, and he is, obviously worried about that, and he's trying to figure things out. And naturally, as the title would suggest, he does a lot of searching, and he ends up going onto her computer, and a lot of that comes from there as well. So it kind of bounces between computers a little bit, and it does things that Unfriended never did. It does like edits, like in fact, yeah, on Unfriended technically. We were led to believe, at least watching that it was all taking place in real time. There was no jumps or anything like that. Obviously, there was clever edits in there so that they didn't have to do it all in one take and so on. And obviously, being on a computer screen with windows closing and opening, it's actually quite easy to fake edits in there, or fake the impression that there's no edits. This is a little bit different in that because not only is it cutting from different computers sometimes, it also does things like it'll zoom in on like one part of the computer. Like if it wants to like emphasize one window or one search box, it'll zoom right into it and then come back out. So there's actually like little camera directions happening, despite the fact that it's all taking place in a computer screen for the whole movie. So it does these little things, which I think first and foremost, if I'm talking about it, like because Unfriended was a pleasant surprise. Unfriended ended up being a pretty decent movie. Ending was a little bit weak, but the rest of it I actually was quite surprised with. Unfriended 2 ended up being okay as well. Some things were better, some things were worse, but ultimately, despite the fact that you would think that, oh, this is a stupid idea, a movie set on a computer screen, it worked well once, it shouldn't work again, and then it somehow did. And then Searching, of course, this actually came out before Unfriended 2, actually, if I think about it. I'm pretty sure this was a couple of months before that. So, Searching is not a straight up horror movie though, but it's a thriller, and I think this change where it's doing these cuts and it's doing these little directions, what effect does that have compared to Unfriended in terms of like, how does it feel different beyond just the simple moves? I think it feels different in the sense that it feels a bit more produced, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it definitely doesn't have that feeling. Like when you're watching Unfriended, you get almost this feeling that you're just like spying on someone's computer. This doesn't feel like that. This feels like someone took all the footage from the computer and then edited it afterwards to make a coherent story out of it. And that's okay. It does give it this feeling of it being a little bit more phony at times. There's definitely one or two times where it'll do something like it'll zoom in or it'll cheat a little bit in some way, and you kind of like roll your eyes a little bit and go, okay. It kind of, at least for me, someone who uses a computer a lot and is used to all the little tricks you're doing and things, whenever it did something that betrayed that, it did kind of like take you out of the moment for a little bit. But that's not to say that it completely like makes the whole thing feel fake or it makes the whole thing feel less effective, because the movie is actually pretty effective for the most part. This was actually another surprising one where when it came out the reviews were kind of positive. It was like, oh wait, people are talking about Searching in a positive way. Is this good? Is this a thing that's worth seeing? And yeah, it's a pretty solid little thriller, honestly. Like, it's not perfect. There's definitely some things that I don't like, mainly that I'll get to in spoiler territory, but let's just say that I think some of the stuff at the end's a little bit, it gets a little bit convoluted towards the end when it tries to explain things, and I think that's inherently one of the big hurdles that a thriller with that's got a mystery has to overcome. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And even when they don't, it doesn't necessarily always mean that it ruins the movie. And I don't think it does here. It certainly does make the whole thing feel a bit less special, though, I think, by the end. But so No, the movie's pretty solid. John Cho's very good. He's basically doing most of the acting on his own. There's definitely other actors, namely the detective. If I can scroll down and see her name, the actress is Debra Messing, who I believe is from Will and Grace, although I've never seen that show, so I will take the internet's word for it. And obviously you have the teen daughter and stuff. So yeah, the setup's pretty simple. We get this sort of opening montage over the credits, which is a lot like the opening of Up. Actually, it's kind of like the history of this family, and it's like, but through the computer. So it's a computer from early 2000s. So it's a Windows XP computer, which I have to admit I get a lot of nostalgia for, because the first computer I ever had was Windows XP. So hearing the do 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 do, I can't. I wasn't even close to the tune. I can't do it. But the tune that played when Windows XP started up, and then the Green Hills wallpaper, like that's there, and then the blue taskbar, all that stuff, that's there. It's very nostalgic if you happen to be of the right age to grow up in that era. But we have this thing where it shows you like them as a happy family, and it's not a spoiler to say that the mother passes away. She's sick. And we see that kind of happen over the course of this montage. So a big part of the movie is kind of how they are dealing with the fact that like his wife and her mother passed away 2 years ago, and that informs the characters and kind of, you know, the undercurrent themes of their journey, which I don't think are like super like deep. Like there's just enough there to give them some undertones throughout the story to suggest that the film's about something more than just, oh, a girl's been kidnapped and it's the race to find her. Like it's not, or the girls went missing rather, and it's the race to find her. It's not necessarily like, I don't know if it's as necessarily as deep as it wants to be with its father daughter relationship and the grieving and the growing apart and closer again after someone's death and after a tragedy. I don't know if it's necessarily as smart with that stuff as it wants to be, but it is there enough that it gives it a little bit of weight. It gives it a little bit of, okay, these characters feel a bit more than just, you know, copy and paste archetypes. They have just enough of a real kind of relationship and personality that you care a little bit as the movie's going on. So no, it's a solid movie, if not exceptional, right? It's not exceptional. It's not. There's definitely some things that happen that feel a little bit cliched or feel a little bit tropey. It definitely feels like if Unfriended was the little like low budget like experimental film, this is definitely the more glossy Hollywood. Even though I'm sure it's still very low budget for what it is, but this feels like the glossier Hollywood writing version, but not in a bad way. It's not actually, that makes it sound like it's really bad. It's not, like, it's actually still pretty solid. There's just some things here or there. There's these little sprinkles of like Hollywood that kind of just make it feel a little bit more too slick in places. But yeah, so no, the actual mystery, like I said, the ending with it's a little bit convoluted, but there is some nice turns throughout. There's this nice obsession thing. I think what plays very well here, because obviously you're put entirely in the role of Cho's character David Kim. Like you're with him along the way because you're following everything. Almost everything you're watching is him doing something on a computer. In fact, one of the little things that I thought was cheating a little bit is how often there's a camera display on his computer so you can see him at the same time. That was one of the things that felt a bit phony. It was like they wanted to see him as much as possible when he was performing, and that was difficult to do without it feeling a little bit cheap at times, because obviously it makes sense when he's on a voice call with someone or a video call or whatever, but there was times when he would just leave FaceTime up at the side as he was doing other things just so we could see his reaction to watching a video or something like that, and it felt a little bit phony because I don't think anyone sits with their own camera looking at them. And so they can see their own. It's one thing it just being on when you're not noticing it, but it's another thing to have it up and be watching yourself. That struck me as a little bit weird. But so we're putting his shows the entire time, and I think what makes these kind of movies work in a bizarre way. And again, I do think there's a danger very quickly of there being too many of them. Like I think it's insane that we've now had 3 of these, 2 Unfriended movies, and now this. And it's not actually gotten terrible yet. And I feel like it very quickly probably will and could be. But I've been saying that since before the first one. I said it after the first Unfriended, I said it after the second Unfriended, and now I'm saying it after Searching, so I could be wrong. But I think what's making these work, at least so far, and this one's true about this as well, is that I feel like most people who use, if not a computer, then certainly a tablet or a phone, when they use it for browsing and things like that, we've all done that thing where we fall down the hole of like looking into things, right? And then so veering into more important territory, we've all done that thing where, okay, something becomes important. Well, not actually as important as, up for debate, but you become, obsessed or into something. Like you get an idea in your head that you want to, I don't know, start collecting vinyl. So you end up like spending like a night, maybe 2 or 3 nights, just researching, collecting vinyl. Where's the best place to buy vinyl? How do you store vinyl? What's the best thing? What's the best type of record player to get? What's the best type of speakers to get? You start researching a lot. And I think there's something inherently about that, that's obviously low stakes. There's nothing dramatic about that. But what I'm saying is that you get this urge to like really dive into like something, and you get kind of obsessed, and that's what you're looking into for a few days. I think everyone can relate to that in some level. So you add actual stakes to it. You add actual drama where he feels like he can do as much as possible at the computer, because we're at a point in the world now where you can do so much sitting at a computer. You can order things. You can look up where people live. You can search databases. There's so much you can do now from a computer that this movie obviously doesn't exist 30 years ago in any form or fashion, but now it does. And much like the Unfriended movies, it does have some authenticity because it has the real Facebook, it has the real Google, has the real Windows, like I said earlier. It has all these things to give it this feeling of like, okay, I understand all this stuff, and it helps the passage of time because, like I said, that first computer that's Windows XP, that's we transitioned from that to other computers. In fact, we transitioned from that to a MacBook, which I thought was interesting. They got both Mac and Windows at the same time. And I thought it was like, wait, it's suggesting that people prefer Macs now? I highly dispute this. I dispute this, just to get nerdy for a second. How dare you? How dare you? I actually liked that this was going to be on a Windows machine because I was like, oh, I can relate to this more than Unfriended, because Unfriended was all Mac stuff. Like, no. give me a Windows machine. But anyway, so that authenticity is there. It does feel a little bit diminished at times in this one because it does these little cheats and these little things that feel unnatural. And I think what I'm actually kind of impressed about in a weird way, though, part of the strength of not being exactly like Unfriended, because one of the things that I liked a lot about Unfriended was how it used little things that people do in their computers to build the story and tell us things about the character. Like one of the things that people did in Unfriended, and I've seen this done in other things in a more sort of wide view, but like you'd have someone on chat on Instant Messenger talking on Facebook or whatever, right? And you'd have that moment where you type something, we'd see what the character types, and then they would delete it. And we would know what they were thinking about, but then they'd hesitate and delete it, right? Or you'd have them waiting for the other person to type, and you'd see the little symbol saying they're typing something, but the message never comes. And the thrill or the suspense that comes with that, especially when you add in, actual threat and actual menace, right? This movie does a little bit of that, and when it started doing it early on, when we see him type something and then he deletes it, I was a little bit worried that I was like, is this starting to get old? Like, have I seen this done now a couple of times that even though I thought it was a really great idea the first time, like, is it starting to get old? But the funny thing is that it doesn't actually do it that much. It actually, very quickly, once it gets really deep into the mystery, it kind of veers away from all that stuff and becomes just about the mystery. If anything, the other side of that, the double-edged sword of that, though, is that the more it becomes about the mystery, the more of a normal movie it feels like, even though it's still from a computer screen. Because it feels like it's doing very similar kind of tropes with like the red herrings and, could this be the killer? Could this be why she left? Could this be, did she run away? Did she get killed? Did she get kidnapped? Was she secretly a drug dealer? Was she secretly into this? Was she secretly into that? There's all these questions that kind of like raise as time goes on. I actually thought I had it solved at one point, and I'm happy to say that I was completely wrong. But admittedly, though, I only thought I had it solved for like 2 minutes. As soon as they presented more evidence, I was like, no, okay, I'm off in another direction. I probably would have liked the thing I thought of more, just because I thought the actual ending was a bit more convoluted. But yeah, it was a fun time. Like John Cho carries it. There's some wonderful scenes because he's such a normal dude. There's some great scenes where he flies off the handle a bit, and you really feel the desperation in him because he feels like a relatable normal dude. A likable normal dude, but a normal dude. And that's one of the other things is whenever he does something away from the computer, it's always conveniently caught on camera somehow so that we can see him watching it again on YouTube later. It doesn't happen too often, but like it happens like there's so much footage that ends up being visible later on the computer screen so we can see him out in the world somehow. Just a little bit too much. Where again, that's what I'm saying. It starts to feel like it goes away from just the intimacy that you feel with this type of setup. That this device of just being a computer screen. And it's something that Unfriended did really well, where you feel like you're with that character the entire time. This movie, it starts off feeling like that, and it loses that a little bit the more it kind of like cuts to news footage, because the search, goes, public and things like that. Like, there's stuff like that that just makes it feel a little bit less intimate. I think, but which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Maybe there's an argument there that it spirals and it feels like it can become bigger. Like this started on a computer screen and it becomes bigger. But I almost wonder, do you just go for it and just like go away from the computer at that point? Then after the Act 2 ending, do you just go say, right, okay, we're off the computer screen now? Is it okay to just like have a narrative point that takes that device away and transitions to a normal shooting style? I don't know, but I was thinking through it in my head, but I was generally enjoying most of what I was watching though. As much as I'm sort of like nitpicking at it and critiquing the things that feel a little bit off or feel a little bit like they take away from one thing but add to it in another way, but it's not all positives. There's just a lot of this sort of balancing. But I think I'll give the spoiler warning now though, so I can talk about the plot and where it goes. So full spoilers for Searching. So the daughter, like we see her, she's very close to with her mother and father, and then her mother dies of cancer, and they're kind of struggling from this. They seem like they're okay, but they're kind of like not talking about it. They're not like they're being friendly to each other, but she's really dealing with a lot of pain. He's the big thing early on is that he almost, when he's saying that he's proud of her, he almost types, this is what I was talking about. He almost types, "Your mother would have been proud too," and then he deletes it. He's unwilling to talk about his wife to his daughter. He's unwilling to talk about those feelings. And of course, over the course of the film, a lot of what like she's going through, this sadness, she's being nice in front of him, but as soon as he's not there, she becomes this sad person, and it's like she's dealing with a lot of shit. They're not talking about it, and he, so she's at like a study group, or so she claims, and says that she'll be home late, and he wakes up. There's a couple of calls in the middle of the night on the computer on FaceTime, a couple of texts, or not texts, but just 2 calls and a FaceTime. And he sleeps through it, and then he wakes up the next morning. There's no sign of her, and it's not until over the course of the day he like checks. She's missing from school. Where's she gone? Oh, she's at a piano lesson. Oh, she's not at the piano lesson. Is she with these friends? Oh, because there's a small portion where he thinks she's went on this trip to the mountains with a couple of friends, and he's pissed at her that she didn't tell him, but he's relieved that that's just all it is. Of course, and then of course like he finds out no, she was never went on this trip. This group of friends invited her, but she never went. And it becomes this race to find out what's going on. Of course, the police get called at this point, because that was actually one of the things, is that the detective Vic, it feels like she's involving him far too much in the case. Like he says he's found some stuff, and because she says try and find out like who she hangs around with, what she might be doing. And he looks into that, and that's fine, but there's a point where they're like FaceTiming each other and they're going over evidence, and it felt like the cop was letting them in too much. It actually makes sense though by the end of the movie. It feels unrealistic at the time, and it took me out of it a little bit, but by the end of the movie, as much as I don't really love how it ends, it does explain why she was so willing to like keep him in the loop, because she wanted to be in the loop with what he was doing, because the twist of the movie is that the cop actually was involved in this. She volunteered for this case because her son was the quote unquote killer, if you will. She wasn't actually abducted. She was just driving out to her favorite spot. She wasn't leaving. She wasn't running away. It's established throughout the movie and through this streaming platform I've never heard of. I assume this is a real thing, if not the name, but at least the idea of it, where people just stream themselves in different places. I can't remember what it was called, but people chat to them, kind of like Twitch, but without the games, and just kind of random, in places. And it's just more of a vlogging thing where she'll talk about how she's feeling, and she befriends this person called Fish and Chips, and it's this cute girl in the avatar, but it's not really a girl. It turns out it's actually the cop's son, because it's repeated throughout the film that the cop has a son who's about the same age as her, and it turns out he was kind of stalking her online. And he to buy sympathy with her, he talked about how his mother was dying of cancer, which she wasn't, but he just said that as this character. And to help him, what was her name? Margot, the daughter, she started not going to her piano lessons and was taking the $100 for each piano lesson and giving it to him thinking it was this woman for hospital bills, thinking she was helping, and it was like $2,500 by the time it all added up. Which by the way, $100 for a piano lesson. Can I just say that feels a bit pricey to me, but I hope it was a good instructor. Clearly, David Kim's having a well-paying job if he's feeling comfortable with $100 for a piano lesson every week. I feel like 30 or 40 would be more what I would assume a typical piano lesson would cost, but is what it is. Maybe I'm out the loop on this. I never actually got piano lessons as a kid. Admittedly, I never learned to play piano. I learned to play guitar in school, but not piano. Anyway, that's a rabbit hole. So yeah, it turns out that the son felt guilty about this, and he tried to meet her at her spot because he knew where that was, right? And he get in the car, and we don't see this. We hear about this after the fact. We hear about this once once David Kim has actually figured out that the detective is some way involved, because it turns out the person who, because at one point there's a confession video of this guy, this ex-con who committed suicide, but he recorded a confession of what he did, and it turns out this was a convict that she knew, and he kind of like finds, because one of the things actually that bugged me a little bit at first is that when he realizes that the photo of the woman that's the fish and chips character on the chat, he sees that same woman as the like on this funeral service that sent him an email about setting up funeral arrangements, and he realizes it's the same woman. And I actually recognized her face immediately. It takes him a couple of seconds. He gets them up side by side and kind of stares at them, but I realized right away that it was her, and I was like, what is this suggesting? But I actually was thinking too much about it, because I thought it was going to be really convoluted, like it was some conspiracy with the funeral home. It wasn't that at all. It was just that this was a stock photo of a model. Like, this is a model who's done a lot of work that's used on a lot of different places. He Google searches the image, and it leads to just this photo of this model, which was fine. I like that. I like that revelation. That was a nice little touch. It's like, this person isn't really who they say they are. And it even makes sense, because the cop at one point said they spoke to the account holder of this fish and chips, and they have an alibi. So he calls the model, and she's like, what are you talking about? No cop ever spoke to me. So when it turns out the cop is behind this, it makes sense she just lied. She never spoke to anyone because she knew that was her son. But so the son, tried to give her the money back. He felt guilty about taking the money. And when he got in the car with her, he just basically just jumped in the car when she was parked at the lake. And she ran, being terrified, quite rightly. And he didn't have the tact or the foresight to try and like explain to her. He just chased her. Rather than just sort of like, I mean, I don't know if there's a right way to approach it. I think showing up in this this secluded place at night, no matter what happened, was going to look terrifying to the other person. But he kept chasing her by the sounds of it, and eventually she fell down this ravine, and he called her his mother, and she covered everything up, and that's kind of how the movie gets going. And but we get the happy ending though. At the end, it kind of swerves us, where we find out on the way from arresting her, when he got the cops to come and arrest her, that they realize that she's in this place, because obviously now they know exactly where she fell. And he gets them to turn the cars around, because theoretically, if she didn't die, she could still be alive. Because there's a little moment where it's like, no, it's been 6 days without water. There's no way she's alive. But then he's like, no, there was like a heavy rainstorm like 3 days ago or whatever it was. Like it's only been 3 days. She could be alive. So we get the happy ending though, where we actually see the news footage of them pulling her out the side of the cliff or whatever, and they bring her, and we see some images of her at hospital, and they're happily talking about her mother now, and she's all happy and recovering, and she's going to piano recitals, and it's all that. It's very sweet ending. And don't get me wrong, I was hoping that she would turn up alive. I was hoping for a happy ending in this one, because unlike in Friendly, it felt like there could be. It felt like, no, we could get an ending here that is happy, and I think that was what it should have had. I think it's just the revelation about the cop and her son just felt a little bit too swervy for the sake of swerviness, I guess, before we got there. I think once the news declared her dead, once the police declared that they were looking for a dead person because they found blood in the car and because the confession said that he'd killed this girl, it felt like it was obviously going to be a swerve at that point. It felt like it was too early to confirm she was dead, and right away I went, well, she's probably alive then. And it made everything, like, from then until they finally revealed she was alive, have this just layer of kind of, like, side-eye about it, where I'm looking at it going, yeah, I don't quite believe you right now, though. Like, I feel like I know there's going to be a swerve eventually here, and I don't trust you, I guess. And then the thing with the cop and the son was okay. I guess, like, call me weird, or call me, you can say I'm incorrect about this. I think the thing that I don't swallow about this twist is the idea that she volunteered to investigate this case. I'm not so sure that cops can just say, hey, I'll take... I mean, I guess there's maybe a situation where, like, the cases have been handed out and she can maybe just put herself in the right place so that she'll get the case. That maybe works. But it feels a bit weird to just, like, we just hear a line of dialogue saying, oh no, she volunteered for this case. I don't get the impression that cops volunteer for their cases in that same way. That was the one plot detail there where I felt like this is a movie plot development. Like, this is not a real world thing. This is just a movie plot thing to make it work. So that felt a bit far-fetched to me. But, you know, hey, I've never worked in a police station though, so who knows? You know, maybe someone will say that this is feasible. But it rang false for me. So I was kind of giving it the grumpy tones for a couple of minutes as it was doing that. And that's right before the ending. Then the ending happens, and I'm happy it was a happy ending. I think it deserved a happy ending, but it was just a little bit of a sort of, yeah, it just miffed a little bit. I think a lot of the stuff that's really good about this movie is because I've complained about what I don't like, I suppose, or where the problems kind of come in. What really works, I was kind of alluding to it earlier about the intimacy with the character, but I think what really works about it is he discovers that he doesn't really know his daughter, and I think that works especially well because, like I say, the movie's all about how the fact that him and his daughter are not communicating because, you know, ever since the wife died. And I think what makes that discovery work is on two fronts. One, it's just the natural discovery of almost the humour of a father, like, realising she has no friends, that she's kind of this weird kid, and he thinks she's got all these friends, he thinks he knows her well, and he doesn't. She doesn't have friends, she's kind of a weirdo, she's kind of a loner, and, you know, he finds her Instagram account, and he doesn't even know what a Tumblr is at one point, and he looks at her Tumblr, but it's when he's looking at her Instagram, and he's like, wait a minute, she has, like, this same guy keeps commenting, is she in a relationship? When he finds the FaceTime thing, or the Face stream thing, and it's this fish and chips character, it's like, wait, is this someone she's in a relationship with? Did she run away with someone? Which is actually where I was leaning towards. I was thinking, before it revealed that this was like a fake image. No, I mean, admittedly, once we'd seen it was a stock photo, it kind of looked like a stock photo, so maybe I should have, like, assumed that right away. But I actually thought they were going for, like, he didn't know his daughter was gay ending, and she ran away with a woman. Like, I thought they were going with that, but not in a bad way. Like, I thought, when I say not in a bad, I mean, like, not in a way where it felt like a sad ending. Like, I thought it was going to be a happy ending where he was going to realise that she'd found someone and that she'd... Now, admittedly, she's only like 16, so she shouldn't be running away anyway, but, you know, I thought, like, this is the sort of ending that would have worked if he'd been an awful father who wouldn't understand that she was gay. I thought that there's a video game that I'm thinking of specifically that made me think of this. I was thinking about... I don't want to spoil the video game because it's a surprise ending, but there was a video game that I was thinking of that has this kind of development where you think something bad happened, but it turned out that she found someone she was in love with, and ultimately it wasn't so much that the main character that we knew about that was, like, having a bad life, but the other person was having a bad life with people who wouldn't understand, so she ran away for the person she loved, and it was like... It was a happy ending. It wasn't a sad ending, and I thought it might go that route. I thought it was maybe going to go the route where she ran away with someone, but it's not because she hates her father or whatever. It was because, you know, it was for more of a happier, understanding, sympathetic ending where the father would ultimately reconnect with her, and it would have a resolution of that sort. It didn't go down that path, but I was thinking that for like a couple of minutes at one point. And then it kind of went in all directions, and it was clearly nothing like that at all. But these were the things that were running through my head. But what I was saying is him discovering these things about his daughter, and because it relates to him not knowing her very well, and discovering that there's these people online that she talks to, discovering that she has this hidden bank account, and she's been taking money and stealing it from him, essentially. Like, what has she been doing with this? Because at one point I was like, is she a drug dealer? Is she like in with the mob? And this is like a mob related thing? Because he's clearly thinking that at one point. He's terrified of it. There's a very dark section of the film, actually. I've not even mentioned. He has a brother, Margot's uncle, who we get introduced to early on. And he's kind of the goofy, pot smoking kind of brother who's, likable enough, but clearly not got his life in order. And there's this really dark implication at one point, about halfway or so through the movie, where Kim, John Cho's character, he finds that there's been text messages between his daughter and his brother that sound very kind of sketchy. It's things like, "Oh, we can't tell your dad about last night. Are you coming over again tonight?" Things like that, and it's like, "Holy shit, is this going down a very, very dark path?" And it turned out it wasn't. It was just basically they were getting high together, and he was being like a friend to her, but there was nothing like actual, because it sounds like there's something sexual going on. It sounds like there's this predatory kind of element to it. And it sounds like this was just her venting about things that she can't talk to her dad about. Like, he was actually, all on the drugs, which shouldn't have been there. He was otherwise being kind of a helpful uncle, I suppose, a loving uncle who was there to offer a shoulder, essentially. But, it had this implication. And I think what made it really especially great is that, John Cho, to prove this, actually buys some little cameras. He goes over to his brother's house, and this is one of the times where it felt like, okay, we're cheating a little bit, because we're on his laptop as it's in the car, because it's recording all the footage of all these planted cameras in his brother's house, because he wants to confront his brother on camera so that he'll have proof. And basically he starts reading out the text, and this is when the movie gets probably the darkest it gets, because the implications here, as he's confronting his brother about these messages, and he just starts reading them out, and he starts to strangle his brother. It gets into a bit of a struggle until his brother finally sort of explains what it is. But there's a good 30 seconds to a minute here where you're actually, I think it's the strongest feeling I got in the entire movie, when it was implying that his brother might have been in some sort of incestuous relationship with his daughter, because I think that was the time where it really hit me in the pit of the stomach. The rest of it in terms of the danger, it was more like fun and popcorn. Okay, I'm enjoying the search for the mystery of it. But it never hit me like in a heavy way. But this was the one scene where I got this feeling in the pit of my stomach, where I was like, oh god, are we doing this? And it was kind of effective, and it was a red herring ultimately, but it was going down this path. And I wonder actually if that's part of why the ending also feels a bit lukewarm. It's not only just because it's hard to buy that the detective was able to gain this ability and volunteer for the case, but also because this red herring in the middle is actually a much, much, much darker story, or potentially dark path, that the ending ultimately feels a little bit just kind of like, oh, okay, it was just that. It was a little bit of that, but those are the things that made it really work. It was all these moments of discovery. Whenever he would discover something, and we could discover it with him on the computer screen, so we're with him for the journey. That's when the movie was working at its best, and that's kind of sprinkled all throughout the film. There's only there's a few times where it maybe goes away from that just a little bit too long, but for the most part, that's what the movie is, and that stuff's pretty solid. So if I'm rating the movie, it's probably a solid 7, maybe a 7.5. No, I'll say 7. I think it's a solid 7. I think there's just a couple of the ending, one or two of the red herrings. And just some of the tricks they use that I feel like they're cheating a little bit. Just drag it down a little bit and stop it from being great. But it is a good movie. I think it's a good movie. I'd recommend it if you want a good 90-minute to 100-minute sort of thriller that has a little bit of emotion to it, and has some twists and turns. But it's not like an exceptional film that I would say you have to see by any means. But it's a solid afternoon viewing, if you will. But yeah, so that's a 7 out of 10 for Searching. So I'm catching up in 2018 movies basically, so you can probably expect another couple of these at least before we do our top 10s. I mean, I know me and Connor are doing a couple on In Flux. We're doing some 2018 catch up on that, so there's two of us watching the movies and talking about them. But there's some other ones that I'm just kind of sneaking in on my own, and that's why I'm doing these. So hopefully this was still enjoyable. Hopefully you like the idea of me doing a few extra movie reviews on my own, and you'll be tuning in, as it were. But yeah, so let me know what you think of Searching if you've seen it in the comments below. You can like and subscribe, that helps a lot, as of course does going to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, where you can support us for as little as $1 per month. You get various things early, you get bonus and exclusive stuff every month. So go and have a look at Patreon if you want to support us. You can also support us a little bit as well. Go over to our stores in the description below. There's links to both the US and the UK store, and you can buy merchandise with on there. Our new 121 design isn't on there yet, but we'll think of some way of incorporating it, I think, soon, if you would be interested in that. But you can buy comics from the multiverse. You can buy Milfers TV, logos. You can buy Screams After Midnight t-shirts, hoodies, and all that kind of thing. But otherwise, yeah, get me on Twitter at Wibble89. You can get MailFuzz TV on Twitter at mailed_fuzz. And otherwise, that is us. So thank you very much for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching movies, guys, and I will see you next time.